You folks just signed in to my signing thing, so that you see it. Please and thank you. Right, that's right. I'd like to call the meeting to order, the January 2nd meeting of the Board of Selectpersons, first meeting in 2024. And we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're in the forum with everybody here. And with that, we open tonight's meeting. Second. All in favor? Yes. Yes. The first item on tonight's agenda is public comment, and this is for any business that anyone would like to bring up, any questions, concerns that are not on tonight's agenda. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to item number 2, which is to review and approve the minutes of December 28th meeting. So right at the top of the minutes, we still have. That's okay.
That was me being quick.
And you may, and I'm even fine if we do December 19, 2023 with a slash through it, reschedule December 28th. Just so 10 years from now, we're like, why did we have that meeting? That far away. Yes, and also right up in the heading, we didn't print the address.
Yeah, I didn't have it.
Yeah.
I didn't have it there yet.
That's okay. So do we have anything else? Corrections?
I did not.
Solutions? Nope. I move we approve the minutes of the December 28th meeting as submitted.
Second. I'm sorry, is as submitted or as amended?
As amended. Oh, sorry, as amended.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And seconded, Carol?
Carol seconded, yes. All in favor, Melanie?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Dan?
Yeah.
I'll vote yes, 5 yes. We have no unfinished business. We probably have unfinished business, but just finished enough
It's not on the agenda.
to come on the road. And the next item, new business, we don't have any appointments or resignations tonight. So item B under new business, which is the position concerning 142 Woodland Camp Road. And the select board, members of the select board have received a petition with various comments and concerns about a property. And so we are here to discuss this. I guess I would like to preface this by saying that this was submitted to us as a petition, but we don't have an actual petition ordinance in the town of Belgrade. And so we need to go by the rules for accepting petitions, which include a certain number of signatures, in this case, 190 valid voters in the town of Belgrade. And so we cannot accept this as a petition that we can really take action on, but we know that there are quite a number of people who are concerned, and so we did want to bring it up for discussion. And I know that there was something that just came to us today, additional information, but it came in this afternoon, and I haven't had a chance to look through it, and I don't know if anybody else has had a chance to give any.
I have read through it. I don't know if everyone else has, but
I read through it too.
Yeah, I read through it, but I haven't gone through it chapter and verse.
And I read that.
Oh, that's what I was referring to, this that just came in today. Yeah. So I know that, our code enforcement officer has, spent a lot of time, on issues concerning this property, as has the planning board. And, I think that, that it's important to recognize that the arm of enforcement of ordinances is our code enforcement officer. And he serves the entire town of Belgrade, one person. And, I think that we all appreciate the wonderful job that he does, on behalf of the town. And I think it's appropriate to say that, we really appreciate all that he does. And has gone back and forth, meeting with Maine DEP on this particular property as well. So I'm not quite sure what action, we, the select board, cannot really take any action. We are not the enforcement arm. The code enforcement officer is the enforcement arm, for the town. So, we understand concerns, we understand that, there have been issues that have been addressed. And hopefully things will be better moving forward. I'm just speaking for myself. I'm one person of five, so. If anyone else wants to
If I
say
may,
anything about where, where we go at this point, that would be great.
if I may just jump in here too. As a former member of the planning board, I do recall this very painful conversation in the past, having gone through this. And having heard good comments and reviewing details about the applicant. And I know it's an emotionally charged issue, and I know that the code enforcement officer has been very diligent in going through this very carefully. So at this point, I just wanted to make sure to mention that from my perspective, number one, I really appreciate what the code enforcement officer's duties are. Very difficult, very challenging. I also appreciate the comments coming in from the townspeople who live in and around that area and have concerns about what either has transpired, not up to code or has not. So I just want to make sure you hear that. It is a sometimes slow process to get through. And we are relying on one person to do a thankless job. So can't thank our code enforcement officer enough. That's from my perspective.
I did take the time to look at some of the specifics that were outlined in the letter we got today. And it appears to me that there are some very specific concerns that were raised. I think we need to look at those just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Certainly, we can't come to any resolution on that tonight. But one piece that did come out to me was it looks as though there was an application that was sent that was incomplete or, and again, this is specifics, but there was, that was, the applicant was to come back to the planning board. And it appears as though that has not happened. So if indeed that has not happened, it seems to me as if maybe there's a disconnect of, I mean, I don't know, does the planning board have a process where if somebody is delayed or rejected or refused, that they're to come back within a certain period of time? And I don't know if we have that procedure, but if indeed there was there was an application that was supposed to be clarified and come back and it hasn't come back in, I don't know, looks like months, then that needs to be looked at to see, because I think it was for a after the fact permit. So if indeed that hasn't been done, then we need to have the planning board do that. And I think we need to look at the specific pieces here that I don't know enough off the top of my head to answer. But I think they do need to be looked at, and we do need to make sure that we've just crossed all the Ts and dotted all the Is and to see what that procedure is. So I don't know, you may know whether there is not to put you on the spot from your former duties.
Well, I can just try to weigh in based on my recollection of that, sort of that process. The planning board has no authority to act on something that has not been presented. Right? So there is a real requirement, if the applicant would be, ask for permission to do something, that they present the application to the planning board to then have a decision made, whether or not the material either meets or does not meet
Right.
the code. So I can't say how often enough we say to the applicants to please work with the code enforcement officer to present information that you wish to have done, or wish to have reviewed. So that process starts and ends with the applicant going to the code enforcement officer to get on the planning board agenda, where an action can then be, decision can be made. If that does not happen, I'm not familiar with any other planning board responsibility that could take place with regard to a pending application. I don't know of any.
So
It would be,
if,
it would be the responsibility of the applicant to resubmit, gather the information and resubmit. No,
And then my understanding would be, if we had the history here tonight, that would be really helpful, I think, to us too. Because from the select board standpoint, we don't have all of the history of the applications and what was requested. I know that this has been coming to us for going on 2 years. I think the first question we had about this was when Denny was the interim town manager. Is when some of these violations or the questions of whether or not these were violations first came to the forefront, and Denny had asked the previous code enforcement officer to go and check. Just from my recollection, I know there was at least one cease and desist that was put on the property owners. And I don't know if they continued to work on the property after the cease and desist. I know there were actually 2, because the first one they didn't post, and there was a secondary follow-up for those particular landowners. I don't want to say that, it might behoove us to have these folks come back to another meeting when the select board is privy to the whole stack of information. When the applications were first received, what action was taken from the town of Belgrade, when DEP went and did an inspection. Because all of those things come into with the current code enforcement officer and how he's moved from that point forward, because he was handed a pile of stuff that may or may not have all been up to snuff. But it was his job to really decipher what's pertinent, what he can act on, and what is outside of his jurisdiction. So I think without us having all of that information, it's hard for us to even make a decision on how to even possibly direct the code enforcement officer with what we need to see for the next steps. I commend all of you for getting together and continuing to put this in front of the board. I've read what you folks have done all along, and I know that there's a history there, and everybody does worry about the quality of the lakes. So, and the tricky part of the petition is, are we past the point where petitions can be accepted? To move forward to a town meeting conversation, because this petition was submitted before they could bring this up at town meeting.
right, but they would need 190 signatures.
Right, are they past the point where they can continue to collect signatures?
This isn't, for town meeting.
This
This was just for
this
this.
was a town meeting, it was to the side.
petition, it's not a warrant.
Okay, because I thought this petition was to bring this up at town meeting, because they felt that the select board and the code enforcement officer was not backing them.
I understood it was just for the, came to the select board.
I mean, to me, it shows we have a number of people that are very concerned about the situation. And I think we need to give voice to that. We need to give them voice. We need to hear. It may be that absolutely nothing changes. But I think we need to go through the process so that everyone gets heard and feels as though their voice is heard. And if it didn't come in quite the right right format, that's understandable. We can't act on it as a quote petition would, but I think the voices need to be heard. And so whether we set up a group or some, I don't know what we set up so that we can come back and look at it in a month. I mean, certainly 2 weeks, I don't think does it, but that we set up some, so we can work through this at some point and make sure that that everyone's questions are answered.
Well, I would think that the code enforcement officer and the town manager could put that information together for us, because they're the ones who have been the most involved, especially the code enforcement officer. And I know that we have some communication from Hans, in particular, an email after he and the Natural Resources Protection Act environmental specialist went to visit the property, when they went to visit the property. So we do have that, but if it's appropriate for Hans and Lorna, and if anybody from the select board wants to be involved in the process, to have a third person to do that, then perhaps that would be the way to go, and to present at, in a month, what the history was, just so everybody's clear on.
Well, the history, I think one of the first things you need to do is go through this petition and all the questions, all the individual points, just have Hans go through and answer in writing each individual point, so we've got an explanation as to why it either meets or doesn't meet.
Right, not from the petition, but from the letter we just received today.
Yeah,
which
which
delineates all.
the different information,
All
like the
of this.
pictures that were, if you look at the pictures of the before and after and give me the points, because I'm looking at the pictures on there and I see 2 trees that have been moved from the pictures. So, but I don't have a scope of the whole yard. And other than that, I see that the yard was dirt. And now it's grass, which actually I prefer to see grass because it helps keep the runoff, rather than being bad dirt and running down to the thing. So I don't know enough about the codes and what you can do and what you can't do.
Well, the bare dirt, and if someone from over there can correct me if I'm wrong, there was lawn surface there
Yeah.
previously.
Yeah,
and
see,
it was
it's nothing,
removed.
it's not really in the form of it, so I don't have a scope of what this.
Yeah, so I think what we need, I know that Richard had taken some pictures when he was our code enforcement officer. I'm not sure if Gary wasn't great about taking photos. But I think the board needs to see what we have in our possession for photos that preceded this and what's happened since then. I personally went and saw this shortly after one of the first complaints. So I have seen some of the history and it looks beautiful now, but this wasn't what it looked like when I went over. So there has been a lot of activity that has taken place there, and a lot of that, as was referenced in here, was happening outside of when we were in transition with code enforcement officers and on the weekends.
Actually, we've had 3 code enforcement officers involved in the project.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
So that's why I say that we need a full history. I do agree with Dan that we need each of their points addressed. And if there are still violations or things, I look back at the whole water quality improvement fund is based on fines being levied and collected. And even after properties have been put back the way that they were supposed to be prior to doing that type of construction.
Right.
So if things like a tree being removed, what is the remedy for that tree being removed? I remember on Dane Lane, they had to go in and put 15-year-old trees back at a cost to the landowner.
Yes.
But they removed the trees without permission. So the remedy was a hefty fine, and they had to return, they had to remove the sand that they had brought in and created a beach. All of that had to be removed as best they could. So if there are enforcement actions that should be done because construction continued outside of the scope of what was allowed, we should know. So
Well, the one piece that I also think is, if there indeed was an application for, I'd have to go back here, that they were asked to come back with a cleaner application. And the owners have not done that. Then they need to come back and do that.
But that's their responsibility because
That's their
presumably they can't
responsibility.
do any work
Right.
until they have.
Well, I think this is was an after permit, so. The work's been done, they needed to come back with I mean, I went to one planning board meeting and that was when they said, you know. My terms, it wasn't a clean application, there were enough things that were changed or inconsistent. So if indeed they were asked to come back with it corrected and it hasn't come back corrected. Then we need to get the town, whether that's Hans or whether that's the planning board, if the planning board's the one that asked. And that's where I question, is there a disconnect in procedure that we haven't lined that out? And have them submit what they need, and they get their after the fact permit, and then if that's what it is, that's what it is. But at least we walk through that process.
So is there somebody from the board who would, I mean, first of all, do we agree that Hans and Lorna, address the points in the letter?
Well, I think Hans can address the points on the letter. I don't know that Lorna would need to be addressed them because he's the code enforcement officer. So he will be the one who, sorry, throw this on your plate, but he'll be the one who's gonna pull together the history for us with the befores and afters, and if they qualify for an after the fact permit. And if they don't qualify for an after the fact permit because work was done outside of the scope of the original permit, or after they were told to cease and desist, then that calls for much heavier lifting as far as enforcement goes. So, and that will all be in Hans, so
And it's
He's
the same
probably
thing,
gonna
it's the
be
same
the
thing
one.
with select board, because we can't really get involved. Because we can't direct the code enforcement officer
Right.
and
to
then
do
we are
his
the
job, he
appeals.
kind of has to do it with the state, and then report to us, and then it goes into legal matters, that's when we start approving, going to court and things like that.
And did you say appeals? I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, we're essentially the appeal process, so we can't be involved in this process, but we're
The fact we can't be involved in the fact finding.
in fact,
Right,
right.
And there is a board of appeals, right? So when an application, after the fact or not, regular one, goes in, there is a decision made on that applicant, on the application
By the planning board.
by the planning board. Then the onus is on the applicant to then live up to and not exceed anything that's permitted in that application. If something happens outside of that, that's a different story. Or if there's something wrong with the board's decision about how they made the decision, maybe an act to deny the application, then the board of appeals could be involved in that part. But I do like the idea of really mapping out each of the opinions that were outlined in the letter and or any other items that could have been in violation. So that the town is dealing with facts. We need to get to facts. As soon as we can do that, then there can be something solid. Without that, it's not. So I guess that would be my recommendation, is to try to map out each of the points that were outlined in the letter,
Yeah, to address each one.
to address each one. That's correct, in the petition. And I do want to make sure to mention, if we haven't done it enough or explicitly, that the multitude of comments that came in support of why the petition matters are heartfelt, and I totally get it, right? I'm gonna go on a limb here and say that we as a board understand what's behind it when people say, hey, we're concerned, right? I get it, so I just want to make sure you all know that.
So,
Does anyone want
Does
to?
anybody have any comments or questions?
Are you inviting public comment at this point?
Sure.
So,
Could you
Peter,
stand and identify yourself?
sure,
for
my
the-
name's Andrew Dallas, 310 Woodland Camp Road. And thank you all for accepting the petition as a request to provide some awareness and some oversight as to what's been going on. Peter, thank you for your work on the planning board, having worked with us personally for our work, and also the rest of the town. Huge effort and difficult job to keep track of. One of the things I'm hoping that you recall, Peter, is that there was a difference of opinion during that meeting about a number of different things having to do with the application and who would be the appropriate approval person or entity, given land use chart or grid or whatever it's called.
Yep.
And at one point, one of the members of the planning board made it clear that, yes, the planning board are the ones that have to do the approval, or at least some of the items that were on that agenda in that application. There were a number of other inconsistencies which concerned me personally. And it concerns me further that, there were notices of violation that were put in place and allowed to expire for this particular property. And, I'm not sure what the reason is to allow one to expire without it being remedied, which it hasn't, which evidently they weren't remedied through an approval process. Certainly not to the planning board. So I'm concerned a bit that there is a lack of oversight and dependency on one person and one person's opinion with regard to town ordinances. It appears to be a lot of other activity that is going to happen over the wetlands in the area, possibly reclassifying wetlands as lake to remove oversight of town ordinances from changes that happen in that property area, specifically 102 Chester Twing, which is owned by the same people. So I'm very concerned, and I'd like to see at least some citizen oversight involved in this, so we don't have one person's opinion and one set of arguments that address a lot of issues that are concerns of a lot of citizens here. But thank you for accepting and taking time to consider this.
Yes,
or anyone online that?
okay,
I may respond,
Hans,
please. Hans Brad, Muscle Code Enforcement Officer. In response to the wetlands and what's happening there as far as oversight. There's being at least 2 agencies watching every step. So everything they're doing is getting approved by at least 3 people. So I know you're worried about speculating about what might happen. The reins are tight.
thank you, Hans. So what's a reasonable time frame for you to get back to us with addressing
A month will be fine.
a month? Okay. So that would be first meeting in February?
Mhm.
Great, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you to everybody who tuned in online, and thank you for coming in person. So the next item of business. Hans, we've started having a monthly presentation from a different department. And so Hans can continue by giving us the monthly departmental presentation on other issues and a general sense of where things are in code enforcement.
I'll step around so you can all look at me while I speak. So it's been just over a year that I've been here, and so most of 2023, what I've dealt with is kind of weather-related issues. Back in April, we had that heavy rain which washed out a section of rail bed. The section that was washed out was built in the 1890s, I believe. Was that correct?
Yes,
And
it never washed out before.
no, it had never been washed out before. I had thought there was maybe an existing culvert that had washed out, but it wasn't. It was actually granite chunks that they put in as a foundation to this rail bed. So water was retained behind it. And there's actually a culvert at a different location that clogged, caused all this pressure to back up, and it blew the granite, everything right out into the lake. It's amazing how much power was there and how
How's
far
that
the,
sandbar doing?
well, that's part of the ongoing work, but these granite chunks, really, they went 40, 50 yards into the lake. It wasn't just, they toppled over. So, on inspection, we had natural resources there, which was Cameron before. We had, Coleman Clark was there from the, shoreline zone. And, work is not done. They have to come back. They did an emergency repair to get the rails going again. And, they will come back with a proper contractor to put in the proper slope, proper riprap, and maybe even excavate some of the fill they put in because there's too many pines. They're worried pines are gonna wash out and let the track settle too much. So they, if you can imagine, railroad contractors are hard to find. It's very specialized equipment. And, this all happened after the derailment of, was it Jackson?
Yes.
So that's why they had to hurry up and get the rail repaired to get repair equipment to that site. So when that one's tidied up, I hope maybe we're next, close on the list. So anyway, that's that. Then we had a rain event 2 weeks ago. Washed out a lot of other things that camp roads and so forth. So those are the big events of the year with us. The last rain event, you know, the winter water levels are supposed to be, like Great Pond's supposed to be 18 inches below normal. They were like 3 or 4 inches above high water. All of the lakes were spilling over. Flooding was everywhere from East Pond all the way through to Oakland. So, down trees are a big problem everywhere. I don't have to tell you that. So, in the spring, a big part of my job will be going around to where these trees and revegetation, you know, because just like 2 trees missing from a photograph, well, there's more than 2 trees missing in a lot of places. So revegetation is gonna be, a big part of my tasks.
Just before you move on, just out of curiosity, if nature takes down the trees, can we force people to put them back on?
Yes. In shoreline zone, again.
You can, okay.
It's part of,
I know you didn't used to be able to, but I thought, you know.
no, it's part of this section O that they, refer to where, clearing vegetation removal outside of timber harvesting. And actually storm damage might be more strict than regular tree removal.
I would expect it to be much more strict.
Yeah. So anyways, a lot of work gonna do this spring.
There'll be a lot of tree planting done, right?
And they're supposed to last a certain amount of time. You know, they're supposed to be, what, 2 or 3 years, they're supposed to live of a certain size when they're planted and nurtured. So, the upside is a lot of these trees that were taken down are surrounded by a lot of saplings. So revegetation may not be required. The new sunlight is gonna allow what's already there to come up, which is a healthier root base than if we force somebody to put a tree in. So it's gonna have to be kind of case by case. And some people are gonna say, well, that's not fair. But we gotta look at the quality of the soils, what's happening around it, and use discretion.
So can I ask you a question on that point, or should we save questions till the end?
No, go ahead.
So if there are trees that have come down within the shoreline zone, is it the homeowner's responsibility to come to you and say, these trees have come down, what should we do about it? So that we contact you and then you go to a particular property?
It is the homeowner's responsibility.
Yeah, and not just to replant the trees, but to go to you first.
Exactly.
Okay,
So.
maybe that should be in the next
Can we put a
newsletter.
notification
Should be the
out about
newsletter.
That should be in the newsletter.
And maybe even something on Facebook prior to
Yeah.
that that says, if you lost trees due to the recent storm and you're in shoreline zoning.
Yeah, then they should document with photographs to show that there truly was, and I've been taking a lot of photos myself of the root bases. Because sometimes when they cut them, the root ball's gonna fall back,
Yes.
and then it's gonna look like somebody just cut a tree down.
Mm,
So we can't be convicting people of cleaning up, you know? And also I've been taking photos of, the snapped trunks. So then, before they clean them up, that way, there's evidence that it was a natural cause and not somebody saying, well, oh yeah, that happened during the storm, but
And that's only in the shoreline zone.
only shoreline zone.
Okay.
That might be worth putting in your report in the town, in your write-up for the town report. Because I think a lot of people would not even think about the fact that they needed to
Right, I mean,
revegetate.
that's why I asked the question,
Yeah.
because we have some pretty big trees that can be in our neighborhood.
And, it's the circle of life. There's, not to beat a dead horse, but Woodland Camp Road is got tremendous trees. So when one tree comes down, it does open a canopy. And there's been a lot of tree removal out there because they are old and hazardous.
Mhm.
There was a project done restoring a historic house. And tree removal was a major part of it, because they didn't wanna redo this house, so it's old 1901 built cabin, and have the top of a tree fall off and go right through it next year. So, I think 13 trees were removed, but again, they were surrounded by just a field of saplings.
Mhm.
So let the fittest survive.
Mhm.
And
Okay, let's let people know.
let nature take its course, Let it do what it's gonna do.
Okay, thanks.
So several stop work orders were issued through the year, just to bring people into parameters. They didn't all involve, fines. I like to try to just redirect people, because whether they're ignorant of the rules in reality or not, if you give them a chance to do the right thing, I think we
Mhm.
let them know that we notice and that they need to comply. So.
Yeah.
Anyhow, citizen inquiries to the office mostly consisted of runoff issues, water runoff, which supports the consensus that most of these residents are concerned about water quality. Okay, I haven't run into anybody that was deliberately spilling into the lake. Okay. Assessing the situations. You gotta identify a violation from what's best practice. Okay. A violation I can enforce,
Right.
that best practice I can recommend. I can't force them to do it. Okay?
Yeah.
And that involves vegetation. And what the landscape's gonna look like. One of the little rules in the land use chart that Mr. Dallas referenced. In shoreline zone, you are allowed up to 10 cubic yards to build without a permit. And that could be sand in your yard, gravel in your yard, topsoil, wood chips. But it doesn't say the time period. So you can do that every year. And over time, you have a transition. And so people fail to see, oh, well, it looked like this 10 years ago. And this is what it looks like now. Everything was done within the parameters and rules. But it was a change, significant change.
Mhm. And I think that's an important point to continue to make, because I know that Seven Lakes, BLA, all the lake
Right.
associations are really trying to do a lot of education as far as best practices. And so I think it's easy for people to confuse best practices with what's actually
Those
enforceable.
ordinances, right,
Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
I would totally agree. And then there is oftentimes, an ideal that one would want to get to when using best practices. That's kind of on one end of the spectrum.
right.
Right,
On the other end would be an enforceable limit that the law, the land use table that you're referencing, when one exceeds that, that's a violation. So the two things don't connect all that well sometimes. And it's really good, I think, whether it's through the various,
yeah, I think sometimes they
Associations.
look like they're in conflict even.
they do,
Yeah.
yeah, I can imagine a sensitive, say, property. And someone is bringing 9 yards of fill to a spot on that property. And someone says, wait, that must be, they're doing something wrong.
Right,
When it's not great practice necessarily, maybe,
right,
but it meets the spirit and the letter of the law.
right.
And so that's not a failing of Hans or the
No,
code enforcement
not at all.
officer. It's not a failing of the town. It is what's in place now. So I'm sorry to.
No, I was done. Is that a great way to close?
Ta-da.
How are we doing, Hans, as far as violations? Like, what are we looking at for violations? What have we done for enforcement actions?
Last year, we brought in about $11,000 in violations. Gentleman was excavating 5 feet from Drake Pond, putting in a patio. Property owner got fined $2,500, and the contractor got fined $2,500, which is the maximum fine allowable for one day. And my approach has been to hit them with the maximum for one day, rather than start at the bottom and work up, because it sends a lot of message. And when they contest, I say, well, we've got 3 days. We can go 3 times if you wish, and they comply. Another one was the old Bellavance property. They were moving some soils last fall. Trying to, their words, try to get it done quickly. But again, it was outside the scope of what they were supposed to be doing. You know, they were doing some timber harvesting, clearing some wood. But they started to excavate and do site prep. So,
That was the site for the would-be storage units?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They should be coming before the board this spring. I think they wanna plan to start working early, late spring, early summer. The new owner is a good guy to work, he's very easy to work with. When I called him, he said, yes, you got me. He came the next morning, paid his fine.
Right.
No argument. I'm working on a couple of cases now where I've stopped work. And it's kind of pending, there's no permits in place, there's too many unanswered questions, and so I'm letting this evolve. I'm not chasing them. Again, I'm trying to avoid legal battles and let people step into their own problems. Okay? So a lot of what I'm doing, not talking about them, just letting it happen. Stepping in at the right time.
And what about, new house permits, things like how are we as far as on track with previous years?
Well, last year we had a 10% decline in building permits and a 10% increase in plumbing permit. And typically, you know, they build the house first and the plumbing second, so it's coming after probably the swell we had during COVID, which, you know, I don't know what those numbers were, but so I think it's just balancing out. So far this year, we're 50-50. even number of permits for plumbing and building, two of each today, so. It's easy to keep track of, and it's only one day. So. What increase in permits we are getting is, solar, rooftop solar arrays. I'm putting them in the building permits because they are going on top of the dwelling. They're getting billed out at the residential building permit rate. But I am earmarking them as solar arrays, so they will have their own. They will count separate from the true construction permit.
That's the kind of solar I like, put it on the roof. It's not overly intrusive.
Yep.
And you tend to look right past it, like any place I've ever seen it on.
Yep.
Again, it's even there.
And so they do it in Germany, they don't have solar farms, it's all, now in Germany, the new code is when you have, well, they got 10 years, you gotta redo your roof, you do your roof, you have to put solar panels on. That's the law in Germany.
Yes, Peter?
Hans, what, if you were to look into your crystal ball for this coming year, what do you see for, the greatest challenges for you, for 2024?
Probably cleaning up after the storm, keeping up with the damages. There, a lot of buildings were crushed.
Mhm.
So there's gonna be, in shoreline zone, they have 18 months to apply for a permit and start their work.
Mhm.
And while that sounds like a long time, people don't expect these expenses, and some people don't insure their cabins. And so it's gonna take people a while to get their ducks in a row. And then they go through the process of finding out what they're allowed to rebuild and what they're not. And so 18 months can disappear quickly.
I think there will be people coming in month 19 to say, hey, can I do this? And through no fault of their own, and maybe relatives of a family member who had the property and they're just adjusting post whatever, and come in to find, oh my gosh, we need to plan, get our ducks in a row to go do this. Then eventually come talk to you and you may find out it's too late.
And that's exactly the situation we've got coming right now, is a permit was issued from the planning board to rebuild a cabin. And the cabin was demolished. And I guess the owner passed away. So now the estate has it, but they've waited too long, they're outside the time period allowed under the building permit and the 18 months of notification, because the way the rule is written, it's if the dwelling is lost for any reason, even of your own doing, you have 18 months. So they had the permit in hand, they're outside the 18 months. So that'll be a rough planning board meeting.
I would think that would be good to include in the article about
Yeah.
storm damage in general,
Yep,
Notification.
reminder,
notifications, yeah.
18
so
months.
That information is all together. Bruce, you have a question?
Yes, just on a budgetary thing, do you think, I don't know if you're involved on the legal side of it, for attorney fees? Do you think you have enough money budgeted for attorney expenses for 2024?
No,
Yeah, do you have a ballpark what you think it should be? So, I mean, it's not too late because we got,
well, I think
Next
it's, what, 25,000?
I can't remember.
I think so.
And, that's a significant number, but it can disappear fast when you start to talk about lawyers and go on a trial.
Right, and
So-
only reason, because what was discussed over
Yeah.
petition tonight may turn into something. I'd rather be ahead of the game than behind of the game. So I'm just throwing that out to you five, you know, to throw, you know,
Budget's not set in stone yet.
right, until the 8th, you know, so that's why I wanted to get Hans' opinion on that.
And I can say Belgrade is looking really good as far as the legal budget is considered. I'm not saying, I mean, it's kind of like there's never enough, because what it is, it's like the badge on the uniform, okay? You walk up to somebody in uniform wearing a badge, there's already, some respect. And by knowing that Belgrade has the money to spend to chase violators, the violators are gonna stay away. So it's a deterrent. In other towns where they only have $5,000, people will openly say, they're not gonna fight you in court, do what you want. They're not gonna enforce the rules.
Mhm.
Anything else?
That's that's my main concern, 'cause I just know that there's been, it's quite a bit of stuff going on and, and I'm just seeing this, I can feel that this may turn into something.
Yeah.
Maybe not, I may be wrong, but
It shouldn't, it really shouldn't,
I just worry about the neighbors.
it shouldn't.
Thank you, Hanson. I want to commend you on your approach of working with applicants and homeowners to get them to apply, to comply. I think that seems to be a good philosophy.
And just for somebody who works with him, he's very good to work with. I work with him here and in Smithfield. He's very great to work with. Any questions, call, he answers them, and he's great to work with, so.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Hans.
And Peter, if I may ask, I need to refer to you on the history of that application that had unclarity.
Yes,
Do you remember was it the path, the location of the path?
if I'm not mistaken, it was the location of the path.
And that's it.
There was mention, I recall, there was mention of, I'm gonna say turf replacing duff. At one point, there was that conversation too. But I think it was the path.
They did have permits for moving the path. But I think the application was kicked back because they didn't submit the application with the new path designated.
I believe that's exactly the point.
And that was the only thing. And the path they put in with the field stone was permissible without a permit. Therefore, it never came back. And that's what my report will say. And Gary gave permissions. And granted, I wasn't there to hear Gary say it. But Andy Dunbar was. And I've got no reason to doubt the integrity of Andy Dunbar.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Hans.
And then it's just-
School dismissed.
Yeah.
All right. Item D, petition resolution to take action on climate pollution. That is behind the scenes.
That should go on the signature. I make a motion, we open that item.
Second,
All those in favor?
so yes.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
My name is Bonnie Sammons. I'm a North Belgrade resident since 1999. Taught sciences at Metropolitan High School and a couple of other central Maine school districts over those years. Climate change is an issue I've got a long history with. At the November, I think it's the November 21st Selectboard Meeting, I let you all know that Nancy Conlon and I were finishing up gathering signatures for this petition effort. We've completed gathering the signatures for a climate pollution article for the town meeting. If you permit me, I have a short explanation, just some background on this. I also brought a couple of items that are on the table over here that have some frequently asked questions and a little brochure that one of our student interns prepared about the policy that we advocate for. So I hope you'll all take a look at those when you have time. So a short explanation. I prepared this in writing so that I won't wander and I'll be concise and not take up too much time. It's no news. Most humans would prefer to avoid climate catastrophe and expenses Many of us are doing a lot of little things in our lives that we think can help, but we know big policies are necessary to address a big problem such as this, which is the carbon pollution that's changing Earth's climate. The article that we intend to bring to the town meeting is aimed at a couple of things. First, to increase awareness and understanding in our community of a fair, effective, simple, realistic climate policy that's been implemented in over 45 countries and that will eventually be enacted here in the United States. It's variously known as carbon fee and dividend or carbon cashback. This national carbon pollution reduction policy charges a fee to fossil fuel extractors based on the amount of carbon dioxide produced when the fuel is burned. It returns the money collected to, from these fees to American households equally. It is not a new policy. It's been around, brought up by the Reagan administration way back in the 80s. The second thing we're aiming at is to give, with this article on warrant, it will give the town an opportunity to tell Washington and Augusta that we support national carbon cashback policy. A couple of points. Passing the article does not mean we're voting for a bill. It's only a statement of support for the idea of carbon cashback pricing or policy. I emphasize that the US is lagging on this, but carbon fees are coming. There have been a dozen bills proposed in the US Congress over the last 5 years, one very nearly passed. What happens to the fees collected is critical. We want our members of Congress to know that in order to protect low and middle income households, an effective bill must include a provision that the fees go to people, not to more government programs and complicated regulatory schemes. When Belgrade passes the article, I'm trying to be positive on this, the passage is communicated in writing to our congressional delegation, the governor, our main legislative representatives, and to the president. Belgrade can join 28 municipalities in Maine that have already passed similar articles or resolutions and a dozen others that are in process this year. A final comment about why we're choosing this avenue for building support. Because climate affects everyone, our volunteer organization, Citizens Climate Lobby, is building support from every quarter. Businesses, industry, faith and environmental organizations, and others, as well as municipalities. We meet twice a year with our senators and representatives in Washington, D.C., and that's not just Maine, that's every single senator and representative in the country. Citizens Climate Lobby is a national and international organization. These people are well aware that momentum is building, and they're taking note that Maine towns are pushing for fair, effective, realistic climate policy. They seem impressed when we tell them that towns are taking this up and passing it. We intend to do some information sessions to bring the conversation to the community so people will be aware of this policy. And if anybody has any questions, I'm here, and we will be doing a session where hopefully there'll be lots of discussion and questions. It's planned for Seven Lakes Alliance. Maybe that could go in the newsletter.
Bunny, are there other towns within our area that are
Farmington,
considering
Mount
this or have
Vernon,
passed it?
Reedfield,
Sorry, what was the first one?
Farmington, Reedfield, Mount Vernon, Starks, well, that's out in the Woollywags a little bit, Bangor and some of the southern city, Portland, South Portland. I can give you the list. I actually intended to bring the list, but I spaced it. Any other? Yes?
So Bonnie, those are the towns that have passed.
Yes.
So my question is related to that. Do you get a feel that the other municipalities, because there are many others in Maine, are they also considering this at this time?
There are some that our members of Citizens Climate Lobby are working on currently. Wells and Scarborough, and again, I should have brought you a list of those because we meet periodically on Zoom with all the people who are working on this. And I just don't have the list in my head right now. But I can get it for you.
Thank you. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is good to see what other people are doing and thinking. And it's a policy that is so sensible and simple, I like simple, that when people really understand it, it's almost a no-brainer. There are some issues with getting to that point of understanding, however, which is one reason that we want to bring the conversation to the local level, to make it real. Anything else?
Any other questions?
I have one question for you, because I think, Barbara, you mentioned that there would be a public hearing dealing with issues that are being brought up at the town meeting.
All the warrant articles.
Can you tell me a little bit about how that works, so I'm prepared?
When do we have it?
So if you need to have it, it's usually done, you do it, what, 7 days, you have to do it 7 days prior to town meeting. That's the last time period. I think we did one last year for the cemetery ordinance updates, right? Public hearing, and I think you held it as part of, your regular meeting night. You did the
Right.
public hearing first, I think, if I remember correctly.
Bruce?
Don't, Mary's not on anymore, but don't quote me on this. I think it has to be before the, absentee ballot
Right.
vote. Right.
Before voting
Right, before
actually
voting
starts.
begins.
So I don't know when the absentee.
That's what, 30
Yeah.
days before.
30 days.
If it's on the secret ballot, it has to be.
Yeah,
If it's on the ballot, it can be before that.
right,
It's not voted on.
right.
Right, and this would be on the floor, right? This would not
No, it
be.
doesn't have to be, we can put it wherever we want with it.
Oh,
So would we consider having it as part of a meeting, say, late February? Would that make sense, or is that too late?
Well, it depends on whether it's a,
Depending on where we
Yeah.
put it.
whether it's a secret ballot or whether it's on the floor of town meeting.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you
So if
want
it's on the
more, if you want
secret
more
ballot.
people to vote on it, then we put it on secret ballot.
Secret ballot.
If you want a town meeting, which can be anywhere from 50 to 150 people,
Right.
then you put it on the floor.
So the benefit to having it on the floor of town meeting is that you get a chance to answer any questions that folks have in advance.
mhm,
Whereas if it's secret ballot, it's the day before and it's a straight yes or no.
mhm.
But the more
So-
people who vote
And we may have
in the secret
400
ballot,
or
then
500
Hmm.
sometimes vote in secret ballot.
Yeah, that's an interesting,
So,
But then the
Comparison of-
difference is whether or not you can get your information out ahead of time so that all of those people understand. And I appreciate you asking whether or not it could be in the newsletter, because that would give you a chance to put some information together.
yes,
And part of the newsletter is supposed to be dedicated to what's coming before the voters in March. So it's probably a twofold approach that you could use,
right,
but you may want to decide where you want it.
right,
well,
yeah, that does give me
that's
some
actually
food
up to
for thought.
us. That's
What
up
was
to
that,
us.
Jim?
So it's up to us as to where it goes, unless it's specifically in the petition to say, put the voters on secret ballot.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we're just bound by law, if we receive a petition with enough signatures, that it has to be presented to the voters.
Yeah,
Just bring a resolution to the voters.
so we have to decide before we finish up the budget meetings and then warrant this and stuff. is to-
Yeah.
Have that discussion, so.
right. Yeah, well, we won't decide that tonight. We'll decide that in connection with the budget.
Right, and we do have a presentation plan. It was scheduled for December at 7 LA. It was canceled due to COVID issues. But it's a really excellent presentation that clearly illustrates many climate change mitigation policies and strategies and drives our point home.
Mhm.
So we'll be, I want to reach out to people specifically who signed the petition to let them know that we'll be presenting this, and I guess through the newsletter would be.
Yeah, if you can send me.
I will send you, I think you told me January 15th was the
Yeah.
deadline.
Yep, I'm trying to get as much as I can, as quickly as I can.
Thank you. Just one other thing I meant to mention, I want to extend thanks to the people in the town office who helped me navigate this, because, it's just not one of those things that you really know all the steps involved, and they were extremely helpful, and And I've just discovered here tonight some other things that, I need to know more about. It's a process.
Good.
Appreciate your
We'll relay your
listening
confidence.
and help.
Bruce,
Two things, usually the petitions go secret ballot, I haven't known them ever go on the floor. And the other thing is, one place for you to help educate would be the senior resources. Senior's gonna be one of the ones more concerned and not understand the information, so, they meet, I think, weekly or monthly. Can't remember what,
At the center?
up to North Belgrade.
Oh, okay. I should
And I
know
don't know.
that.
Mary-
if
Mary
anybody's
holds
got a copy
meetings
of
here.
The Sun for All Seasons too.
Yeah, they do the
Good,
weekly.
good point.
Copy time of the Sun for All Seasons.
That's gonna be the people that are gonna be the most concerned with this, so if you can get
Well,
your
thank you.
education of that,
Yeah,
they can say, look.
Good points.
yeah, thanks a lot. If anybody has any other suggestions about, you know the town better than anybody, probably the best ways to get the word out. Even though I was in the school district all those years, sometimes I felt like you were in a vacuum and nobody knew what was going on.
Well, we have a newsletter going out before town meeting, so
Yeah,
your
Yeah.
deadline's what, January 15th for an article?
yeah, she
Yeah.
can get me some.
She has that, okay.
okay,
Okay.
thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The next step for consideration is Center for All Seasons Engineering RFP.
Motion open the meeting.
Second?
All in favor?
Yes.
I'm not- Okay, so Lorna and Corey.
Corey's on. So we know that there are some things to do at the center. Some of the ideas are remodeling the bathrooms, additional storage to, addition for storage to include staff bathrooms and showers. So we can open as needed for a shelter, rebuild the roof on that end of the building, a proper heat source for the kitchen, support beam replacement, walkway on the kitchen end, and lighting around the building. And so we're simply looking for approval to work on putting an RFP together to bring to the board for consideration and review, and then getting that out.
So the previous engineering quotes that we had for the work that needed to be completed at the Center for All Seasons, is all that work's been done?
I'm not familiar with the already done. Corey, are you there?
I am here. I have no idea what was done previously to what the only plan I have seen as far as engineering was a blueprint of the storage unit at the end of the Center for All Seasons. It's like, what, 15 by 28, 30, something like that, with a different pitch line in the roof. That is the only thing I've seen, and no, that has not been done because there was never money when you guys were working on it to finish that job.
So that would
But that
be,
job really doesn't cover the scope of what work should be done. I mean, we should have a small group of people to go over what needs to be done at the Center for All Seasons, come up with a plan, and then bring it back to you guys or bring it to an engineer and have it done properly. There's nothing that I saw in the blueprints that addresses plumbing. There's nothing that addresses a heating source for the kitchen. It changes the roof line a little bit, but there's so much more that could be done and should be done at the same time, instead of let's just do this little bit of piecemeal thing here and leave the rest of the issues alone. It's just not anything complete.
so you're suggesting a two-step process. One would be to establish a committee of a couple
Yes.
people to make the list, to go over what's needed, and then to look at hiring an engineer?
That would be my opinion of what needs to be done, because like I said, the blueprints that I've seen for finishing that end of the building is nothing more than doing that little bit of a storage unit and redoing the siding and changing the pitch of part of the roof. That's all I've seen. Whether there's more out there, I've never seen it.
And so we would need to have the showers so that we could open the building as a shelter?
Correct.
Absolutely, we do.
Okay,
And
Would-
one of
would
the concerns that I have, the Center for All Seasons is getting more and more populated to be used. There's more kids there at all the time. How are we safely having staff use the same bathrooms as children? 20 years ago, fine. Now, I don't find that a good idea. I think the staff that works over there, and I talked to Dan about this last year, they need their own bathroom, logically.
Peter, I got a question for you as
Yes.
a former person on the planning board.
Yep.
We had showers and we had bathrooms. What's that gonna do to the septic?
Yeah, we need to make sure we go, because that would increase the need, so we need the licensed plumbing inspector to approve that section.
So that leach field is, and I'd have to take ponds to dig up the records on it, but I believe we're working off the leach field from the old camper. So if that leach field's probably size big enough, but the age on it is,
Well, we got the issues with the stuff even clogged and everything else as it is.
right, so yes, and then, Corey's got, you know, all the right things he's asking. I mean, it's, you know, it's like the heat, we put a propane heater in the storage area to heat the kitchen, because that was never adequate. You've never, since day one of that building being built, you've never been able to heat the social room or the kitchen. So we put
It
propane.
was that the fireplace was gonna be in use, which was gonna take care of.
sorry, Melanie, can you hear you?
Part of it was because they installed the fireplace when they built it, and the fireplace's intention was to heat that space. But then you can't have a fireplace in a public location, so the fireplace doesn't get used, it's capped off now.
So would the showers go on the end where the restrooms are now?
I would think would be on the end of the kitchen in the existing storage area would be my best guess as to where it would be the easiest place to take care of things. But I don't know. I don't know where you would put a shower on the other end of the building.
You do have a septic you can dump into on that end. There's a brand new septic with a pump station on that end, so you could on the north end, I call it the north end, but.
Yeah, so I think putting together some sort of a building committee is probably a good idea, Corey, and also pulling together the history on the building.
Okay, yeah.
Because we have done this several times over the time I've been on the board, and we paid to have engineers come in and had great plans that don't come to fruition. So.
I definitely don't want to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean, some of the main things are, you know, the ventilation and the fact that there are icicles that come off that building that are 8 feet long.
He's fixed, yeah.
You know, so those are some of the stuff that's been addressed, but I think we probably, if we're gonna look at this and look at renovating and increasing things at the Center for All Seasons, I think we need to look at it as a whole.
I agree with you.
Long-term project, we're not gonna accomplish this in 1 year. What are the things that we've previously identified as absolute needs? The pitch of that roof was a major one. But we've got to get all those things on a spreadsheet so that we can check what's been addressed, what still needs to be addressed. So if we're going to expend the money for further engineering, that this is an end game project that the taxpayers will see some sort of an end to the bleeding of money into the Center for All Seasons. And
Well-
how does it benefit everyone? But that was one of my concerns, because the center was built originally to also be considered an emergency shelter for the town of Belgrade. And we didn't have to have the showers because we had the outside shower facility, but those showers are shut off in the wintertime.
They're not even on in the summer.
They're
because
not
there's
in
no-
the summer anymore, so. You know, so there were a couple ways that we were able to get around that. But I think, as we saw, we should have had some sort of a warming center in the town of Belgrade when every citizen was without power. So I think it's important for us to look at the project
Right now,
going forward,
that's
but maybe.
That's a show.
Yeah, and that's, we contemplating opening that up, actually, I volunteered to open that up.
Well, you know, when we're looking at the Center for All Seasons, I think we need to look not only at the building, but we need to look at the land usage, because if they're talking about building a pickleball court, and originally I heard it was gonna go right outside the kitchen, you know, up close. Well, if you're going to expand that building, you're going to need that space for expansion. So I think we really need to look at a 5 and 10-year plan of, you know, we may not expand that building for 5 years, but we don't wanna build something that we've gotta rip out when we get ready to expand. And I think that's a big overview of what does the campus look like? And if we're gonna put pickleball courts in, maybe they need to go further over. But just to really, you know, one of the challenges I think they have now is, right now they have all these school programs and after-school programs, and you've got, for lack of a better word, the littles, and you've got the older kids, and there's not sufficient space as those groups are growing. So you really need another space for one of those groups. So it's a big comprehensive look, and I think it needs a real overview of the whole campus. And then, so knowing this is our big picture and pick a number, 10 years, where do we expand and what do we remodel? So we're not redoing and ripping out and redoing again. And that we need a real strong committee to look at that.
So I agree with what you're saying, Carol, and Melanie, what you said. I think in support of those things, having a building committee that could declare a purpose or a vision for that campus, the building and the campus, so that an engineering plan supports whatever that vision is,
Right,
and so that engineering will match to that.
right.
You know, when Corey talks about a support beam replacement, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking that's critical.
Right.
I'm not sure if it is, but that's what I'm thinking. So if we have a purpose and vision and an engineering plan to look at needs first, also what Dan said about what happens when you have more showers and bathrooms and stuff,
Right.
and more water going up. We have limitations on current leach field, you know, capacity, and what does it mean for a design for that going forward? But I think if we start at the basics and say, this is our vision for the building, this is our plan for the campus, how we get here from point A to point B, 5 years or 10 years, this is how we do it. And that's a planful, comprehensive way to do it, and I would support that 100%.
What I'd like to see is some of the people on this committee, you only have a huge committee, 6, 7 people at the very most. I know like what you're doing with the fire department, and we can help. I'd like to see somebody from the rec, somebody from the board, possibly a retired electrician or a retired plumber in town, that somebody isn't gonna say, all right, they're trying to drum a business for themselves to bid on. But if somebody who's retired and did it for a living, you know, that they'll come up with, okay, the thing, the septic, we're gonna have to look at that. Electrician's gonna go, okay, well, if their plan is to expand this and put in pickleball courts and have lighting and do this, do we have enough power generation? We're gonna be messing around with electrical, you know, people that know the jobs that are gonna have to be done to make this work. You know,
You know, it's like a spring, you know, somebody retired in the sprinkler, because that's gonna be a big thing. in
yeah, he's
sprinkler.
gonna have the sprinkler.
And I know
added
that,
on. That room, you may have to put in a larger tank,
right,
you know?
that tank's at capacity now, so.
So,
We just need, But you're right, you need to have a really competent building committee look at that and say. Yes,
Somebody who's working in the industry and knows what they're gonna have to do, and that way when it goes to the engineer, we don't get a surprise.
Right.
well,
The
you
building-
also have to incorporate your waterfront. Whatever you're doing, you have to make sure that
You
your
gotta step back far
waterfront's
enough,
accessible
But
and
you gotta step back
protected
far
and,
enough for
yeah,
the, you know,
it's a big picture, big look.
And a very important part of that is the programming, because you can have all the building that you want, but, you know, you really have to look at what are the programming needs going
Right.
forward. And how can the building serve the program?
Right,
Well, again, we don't
absolutely.
wanna drag this out without fixing the stuff that absolutely has to be
Right,
fixed.
there's some things that
Right,
do,
right.
The stuff that we've already identified and engineered and paid people to come up with a
Yeah,
plan and
we
have
got beams
have
that are.
multiple
Yeah.
building
replaced, we're gonna-
committees working on this.
right, absolutely, the safety issue is
Yes,
is a priority, take care of safety first,
agreed.
but like changing roof lines. I'm not sure I wanna change a roof line until I know if there's an addition where it's going, so I get the roof line right for all the buildings. So. But.
So is there a volunteer from the board who would work with Corey on the committee?
I'll do it. I just have to work around my schedule somewhat.
Like I said, if you're gonna have a bunch of people, somebody more Parks and Rec. Because they
Right.
won't see everything,
Right,
possibly Dan, or if he wants to be on it, because he's gonna have to work on this building.
right. I would say definitely
You
Dan.
know, and then if we can find somebody who's in the trades, retired, is willing to look at some of this stuff, at least the pieces of it.
Mhm.
Even if you find a good retired general contractor, would probably be your best guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that, you know,
Yeah.
so-
And then the other thing is like the fire department, you're gonna want somebody from the public. At least one person from the public that doesn't have any involvement with the center.
or the town government, or
Yeah,
everything
right.
else.
Well, we should
Yeah.
probably have our emergency director
Yeah.
be part of it.
Jeremy should be
is gonna
involved in
To
it.
be filling us in on what we need to have if we make this a shelter that we can utilize.
Well, Jeremy would be a good one that has to do with necessarily working, having a retired sprinkler company. At least Jeremy is in the
Right.
fire marshal's office, which can get the questions on sprinkler expansion and everything else through Rich McGrath.
Right.
You know, so that may kill two birds with one stone, type of thing.
So Corey, are we making this more complicated than it needs to be?
I think you guys are hitting everything right on the head.
Okay, good.
It's a great plan. I think if we start this and then we stick to our plan, we won't be having money spent that shouldn't be spent. But I agree with Peter, if there is, oh, and my thing is, are you there?
Yes,
Yeah,
Okay, if we've got some emergency needs, then maybe we can do a simple fix on some of these things that need to be fixed so that we know our building is safe. And then we work from there I agree 100%. We get a committee together and we start from the bottom and work our way up.
Corey, where's the support beam?
There's a couple on the porch that are rotted almost half through. Those hemlock beams that they have there.
And those are simple, you know, jack up, pull out, support.
Pull
and
out,
then-
put new ones in, exactly.
I think maybe you could put together the immediate safety issues you see that we address first while we're putting a committee together, and, you know, that committee's not gonna come up with everything in, you know, a month or two. It's gonna take a bit to look at a comprehensive plan, but we take care of the safety issues.
yeah.
And that's why I wanted to bring this before you guys now, so we get a head start on the season. And everybody is right out straight busy all the time, and this is gonna take a long time to get the process moving. So,
Yeah,
Right. So I think we're
Something to plan.
in consensus that we can
Yes,
go ahead and start a committee.
okay,
and identifying the most important life safety issues to be done first.
Right, meetings. Okay,
Needs versus wants.
thank you, Corey.
You're welcome.
Okay, town report dedication and lifetime achievement award.
And I make the motion that we reopen it.
Second.
Second, okay. So I make a motion that we dedicate the town report to Marie Possible. She is the reason we have a food pantry in the town of Belgrade. She is the reason that we care about feeding folks who don't have enough money to feed themselves. She was the heart of that, so much more. And I would love to see her face on that book. For all eternity.
I think it's a great idea. So was that a motion?
That is my motion.
So I second that wholeheartedly. It's good to have that heart on the front page, of that kind of report. That was great.
Is everybody-
All in favor?
I am.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I'm in favor. And then we have the
Don't we also do some
memorials.
bios, memorials or something?
Right,
inside?
yeah, and we have the list of people who passed away in twenty.
Well, it's, we sort of, I mean, I know that Vera Stewart's not on it. Marie's not.
Right, this list was as of the 30th of November.
If they didn't pass away in the town of Belgrade, they can't be on.
I realize that, or it's in the county, right? Because Marie was in Farmington, that's why she's not there.
If they don't die in Belgrade, I think.
But anyway.
It's, you know,
But
There's people on here, it's. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, so I was reading that,
I don't think we get notified if,
It's a matter of notification.
You're right. We have a subscription to the Sun Journal now, an online subscription, so we can see all of the obits.
Mhm.
Yeah.
shouldn't it be Central Maine or Kennebec Journal, since those are the obituaries for this area?
I'm sorry, not Sun Journal.
Okay, I was like,
Yeah.
that's Lewiston. We care about what? Not as much as we care about our neighbors.
Right, Central Maine.
but
Typically, what happens? Do we reach out to, I mean, how do we pick where we get bios? Do we just reach out to family members and say?
We
we'd
reach
like
out to the
see
family and we ask them to write something about their loved ones.
And
And a photo.
And submit
And
a
a
photo.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, I guess I would mention, I look at Joan McGill, the McGill family's been in Belgrade a very long time. Actually, I knew she was very ill. I didn't realize she'd actually passed away. As, perhaps one of the memorials inside.
I would say Barbara Workman.
I don't,
is the reason.
quite a number of these people I don't know, but. Lucille Jenny.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So we say 3 memorials at this point? Did you say?
Jenny, McGill and Workman.
Then McGill.
I look
Barbara
at Vera
Workman.
Stewart, she's another that isn't on this list, but
Passed away, yeah.
long time in the depot.
actually, no, John was a school teacher, I say.
Sorry, what was the last name you mentioned?
Huh?
What was the last name you mentioned?
I said Vera Stewart.
Vera Stewart.
I'll still reach out to that.
Yeah, we
Yes.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the-
We usually
The
look
dedication.
inside, we usually do 4 or 5.
I'm just curious, is the Richard Gagnon, person, a member of the Gagnon, or what person is he?
I know who he is, he's not Gagney's.
Okay,
I
thank
mean,
you, yeah. So I was just thinking about prominent business people and family
Right,
members
yeah.
there who might,
Yeah.
might be appropriate.
I miss the fact that John Weston died. He's a young guy.
It is Joan McGill, Beverly McGill's sister?
No, Joan McGill is, Mark McGill's mother, Mark and Valerie. She lives there on School Street, corner of School Street and Hewlin Road.
Okay, so. it must
But
be
so she would be,
cousins.
I think her husband and Frank McGill maybe were first cousins, something.
Gotcha, okay.
And, yeah,
So did you add Vera to the
Huh?
list? Did you add Vera Stewart to the list? So
well, I
that
added
would
it to
put
my
us-
list. I don't know if we added it to our list.
That would be.
I offered as a name.
It would be good, right?
Or-
So if we
Oh,
did
yeah,
Joan,
I put her on my list.
Vera. And who else are we
So
thinking?
some years we've just had one or two.
We have.
Yeah,
Some
it
years
depends
we've
on
had,
the person or family that the volunteerism and what was done in the town,
right,
the
Yeah.
impact they make.
right. So, I mean, I think even 3 or 4 would be fine.
Right.
All right, so I make a motion that we do memorials for Verna Lucille Jenny, Joan E. McGill, Barbara J. Workman, and Vera Stewart. She's the dedication,
Right, but
so there'll still be the dedication, we'll have.
as long as it's got the bio.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be, that's the big,
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
and then the rest of them get a half a page.
Yeah,
So motion, I'll second,
Motion.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Dan?
Yeah.
Carol?
yes,
Yes,
Melanie?
Yes.
I didn't know.
and it is possible that if we will ask the family member to submit something, some may not.
Right,
right.
families usually get about chasing. She's like, "Hello, did you make
Most
this?"
people do. Most people do see that.
I'd be surprised if they didn't.
And did you still want to do the 1 or 2 lifetime achievement awards?
Yes.
Oh, right, sorry, I forgot that.
So, what I would like to see with those lifetime achievement awards, I don't wanna have you have to cut the matting, like you did that other time. But if we could do a nice framed certificate, Mary's usually really good about pulling together years of service and the various things that they've been on, but I would like to make a motion that we present at town meeting 2 lifetime achievement awards, 1 to Jack Sutton and the second to, Bill Pulsifer.
The second that.
All in favor?
Yes,
Yes,
Yes.
it's a no-brainer. It's-
Yeah. I don't want to miss them.
Yeah.
I had a suggestion, you know how we have the Boston key and we put the little nameplates? Could we have something, a wall plaque, either in the meeting room here or in the foyer or out front? Where lifetime achievement names, they would each have a name.
have their
plate.
plaques on.
And the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
keep adding, yeah, each year.
Yeah,
That might be
I think that would be a
nice.
nice idea.
Very nice.
And then we won't forget about doing it, because we tried last year, and then I think you're going to, it's too late, and
I think. Right, other business. Anybody have anything other business to bring up? Lorna?
We have a budget meeting next Monday. And speaking with Mary and Nick this morning, our deadline to have warrant articles finalized I think Mary needs to send those in the 17th. So we discussed moving that January 8th budget meeting and doing it as part of your select board meeting, the 16th.
I would
That's gonna be
say
long.
no,
That
because
could be,
that
yeah.
puts us too tight, so if we still discover there needs to be any
If we come up with
changes,
something that's
that
not
gives
ready,
us a
then
week to make sure that it's done and not an overnight.
Yeah, not only that, that budget meeting, that's when we actually go through and we vote on the article and
And the budget.
budget
votes.
committee reviews.
Yeah, I'll get read completely,
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's gonna be fairly long.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd rather keep it the 8th
And
myself.
then and then if we have to do something extra, add it to that select board meeting.
so the figures, my big concern was the figures that you see, the final expense figures on your warrant articles. Those are not going to be the final figures. And so if you're okay with that, in a sense, they're unaudited amounts
So
because
that's
we
what we
won't
do
have
that,
that.
Warners, if we don't have that finalized amount at that, then that gets taken up at the beginning of the next meeting.
Yeah.
So we would have an abbreviated budget meeting prior to the board meeting, fill in those. And suggest if it's a monetary thing, that the budget committee is either present at the beginning of that meeting or present via Zoom so that they can vote. Because it's imperative that those bottom lines say how many on the select board voted and how many on the budget committee. voted.
Right,
Right.
so are we getting together January 8th to vote on warrant articles?
Everything,
Cause I
Yeah,
think there's a lot
that
of
has
warrant
fun.
articles, regular warrant articles that we still have to formally.
We have to have what the budget approves and what the select board.
Yeah,
recommended.
I just want you all to be aware that if you see a warrant article and it says this is what the 2023 budget amount was, this is what we expended, and this is what we're requesting for 2024, right? We've got those 3 columns.
Right,
That what was expended, I'm not going to have the final figures for what was expended.
we should
won't have that
If everything closes.
because of the
on
auditors, you mean,
December
or just because of.
No, we still have another warrant for 2023.
which should be done tonight, right?
No, we have one more to close out 2023. That's normal, yeah.
We usually
But-
have it at
But
this meeting.
the numbers, as long as we've got the numbers that we're asking for in the next budget,
Right,
if
I mean, it
the
doesn't.
middle number doesn't affect your thing, so
Right.
if those aren't 100% complete, and we have those for the last meeting
Right.
before.
Right,
As
then we
long as
We
we've got
should be
the numbers, we
okay.
know those are right, it's not
Yeah.
affecting what we're
As
budgeting,
long as you have it to date, you
right?
know, so as of December, I'll say
Right.
throughout the 15th or whatever, you know, not 15th, but the first select board meeting in December, you know, that warrant would be current. I don't know, you know, if you have it to that date, so you know what your,
What we expended up until that particular date.
right.
And knowing that we may have updated those figures, but those really, those are fine, I don't have a problem.
Looking back in 2023, it looks like the meeting that we'll be having January 8th, we had you all review and approve and vote on the secret ballot warrant articles. And then at your second select person's meeting for January, you did the rest.
And that.
You
possibly-
voted.
And we may have done it, we had possible, so, yeah.
Yeah.
But if we,
But it's just too much to do with one night.
right.
It is a lot to do.
What happens is when we do it too close like that, then we're panicking because we don't have enough time to remedy anything. And if we're meeting on the Tuesday and everything needs to be in by the Wednesday, that does not give us a chance to.
Right.
You know, I don't have a problem next week, if we have the number that we're asking for, that's the one we're concerned about. If we've got that final number, I don't have a problem voting on it. And then plugging in that,
Yeah.
how much we spent this year, that's just details.
yeah, I mean, it's just a question of how much the actual from the end of 23 would affect the budget request for 24. but there shouldn't be a whole lot of difference.
We should know.
We should be close anyway.
Yeah, we should be close, so I don't see any problem. Bruce?
Yeah.
And is that meeting gonna be on Zoom, so department heads can listen in case there's questions?
It should be,
Okay.
because we haven't been doing those Zoom meetings, but then we've had some questions as to how stuff was phrased or what exactly was said at the budget meeting, so probably we have the technology, it's probably not a bad idea to record them.
Yeah.
I've got something else I want to bring up. We think, have us think about before we get to the end of that and finalize warrant articles. With what's going on around the state, with the city of Portland, we're moving these homeless encampments. They're already talking that a lot of these homeless people are gonna get pushed down to Old Orchard and Scarborough. What's happening if they start camping in Augusta and Augusta starts enforcing it? They're gonna start getting pushed out. I think we ought to consider having a warrant article, simple warrant article saying public camping is not allowed on town property. So that it's in place. So we don't run into the same problem we had with people parking when they weren't supposed to park because we don't have an ordinance saying you can't park, so you can't enforce it.
Mhm.
So I think that should be there, so if for some reason we have to start enforcing something like that. It's an ordinance
Mhm.
that we can enforce, because the last thing, people need a place to stay, but you don't want needles and everything else coming to our public parks, or have them go down to the community center and start setting up tents, and we can't do anything about
Mhm.
Hayden Park would be the big
it,
one.
so I just think it's something we ought to think about having in place as a preemptive thing in case something happens.
And who would do the enforcement if it's our,
Well,
would that be?
police,
state
we can send it to
sheriff?
police as long as we have.
We have to have
an
an
ordinance in place. Just like we can't enforce, like when we're having parties and noise things, without ordinances,
Right, there's no enforcement.
there's really no
No
enforcement.
enforcement.
That's how Portland is moving. And their new city manager is closing down these encampments because we have an ordinance that says you can't camp, so.
Right, Waterville's dealing with it too.
Yeah, so, and that's what I'm afraid is gonna start happening, it's like, as you build houses in the city, farther and farther out, push the wildlife farther and farther out, it's gonna.
I think it's less likely here though, because it's not like Belgrade is a community where you can walk to a grocery store and a Walgreens and,
But,
We've already had an issue
Yeah.
2 years ago.
yeah, but what happens is, when you have no other place to go, you have to go somewhere.
right.
So I just want something on the books that if we have to use it, it's there. Hopefully, we never have to use it. But
So, but do we have time, Dan, to get an ordinance
it's very simple.
together for town meeting? Because you have to have a public hearing, you have to have a public hearing before you can put an ordinance to the voters.
Mary told me as long as it's written and it's approved by the select board before the 17th, it can go into this, it can go on the ballot.
Because I mean, it's still discussed to have a public hearing before we put it on secret ballot. So. And I really just write a simple 2-line warrant article. So what town of Belgrade adopt an ordinance so that prohibits camping on town property.
I mean, we have it as we already have it as a rule anyways. Just getting it now as an ordinance just gives you a little bit of teeth so you can enforce it. I mean, it's already a rule. You just change it where you have a little teeth to be able to enforce.
So it's a rule that's listed on all of the town parks, with all the do not.
Yeah, but it's just, it gives you a little bit more teeth.
Without the town and voting on it, it's not an ordinance, so you can't,
Sure,
the police won't come out and enforce it.
sure.
It's something to think about.
Yeah,
I'm comfortable with us looking at something, if we can craft
If
something.
we can get it done in time. I hate to try to do it after the fact. It's like the solar,
Right.
we had to do that moratorium on the solar so we could try to get that ordinance in. I don't want us to do stuff after the fact because then it's just.
And remember the no porn by Bill Griggs, so Julie had to put a policy and an ordinance together, says you can't have a porn shop too close to the school.
Right.
Seems like common sense, but we had to put it in writing because it's not common sense for everyone.
Right.
There must be other towns, like you mentioned, that have an ordinance in place. We could pull something and, or.
Right, I just wanna find something simple, just so we've got it, and if we have to use it, it's there.
Well, and we pay Phil, so why not just ask him if he can put together
Yeah, that shouldn't be
the
something
warrant
like
article for us.
Right.
And what is
Just-
the,
The wording on it, no public camping, because the Center for All Seasons may do a program for the summer camp for a camper.
Right.
At the end of me, so make sure it's worded, no, you know, some way to word it, so they will still be able to do that.
Unauthorized public camping or
There you
something
go,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just something
Yeah.
simple,
Good point.
you know, I hate to start having people camping over here and start having these 10 fires that they're having and
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
Yeah,
putting these propane users in. the middle of
That's
it.
only increasing.
we have an encampment near
It's getting horrible.
O'Connor's and somebody pooped in the parking lot. So
Yeah.
that isn't something that we wanna deal
No.
It's really too
with. Without facilities. Yeah.
Services, more services for these people.
okay.
Okay, so, do you wanna, so will you work with Phil?
Yes, I'll
And bring some
reach out.
language back for the next meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll forward out whatever I can get to you all prior to. so we can start putting it there.
Maybe maybe if you can get it for the 8th, we could,
We can look.
Kick it
or at least a
around.
draft, and then
And make
if we have
sure
to
it's what we
finalize
want.
the next one, that's fine.
so we have time to get it where we need it.
Okay, moving on to warrants. I move that we approve AP warrant 153 in the amount of $79,096.06.
Second,
Any questions?
Yes, page 2, we have Da Vinci signs, pen and around nameplate, but I can't seem to find an amount.
Da Vinci
Yeah,
is the vendor.
yep, Da Vinci signs, there's no amount for it, goes right from that to.
Yeah, it must have got lost in the page turn, although I did see that.
$20.40.
Yeah, it must be one of these.
It's a nameplate.
Oh, you know what, page
Page
3
3 is missing.
no, it's a few pages later. Okay,
oh,
it's out of order, so page,
Yeah.
yeah.
Page 3 is
okay,
after page
three
5.
Okay, I got it now.
After page 5. It's just out of order. But I saw that as I was like, I had the same question, and I saw it, and I thought, oh, did she get 2 name tags?
Well, that was my only question, I was like, did we budget for those, or amount there?
Okay. All right. So we have no, I move that we approve it, somebody seconded?
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
seconded,
Okay, all in favor, Melanie?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Carol?
yes.
Dan?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. All right, 5 yeses. Okay, so let me see, then we have in 2024, we already have 2 warrants. One's a big one. I move that we approve AP warrant number 1 in the amount of $626,847.46.
Second,
The bulk of that going to RSU 18.
yeah.
So was I gonna keep them kicking that money out of that?
I haven't reached out to Carl yet.
Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
No? Peter?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
I'll vote yes, 5 yeses. And payroll warrant number 2 in the amount of $23,875.59.
Second,
All in favor, Dan?
Yes.
Carol?
yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Melanie? Yes. 5 yeses, and payroll warrant number 2.
No, did we know when the village dam repairs of the other towns? Does anybody agree to kick in?
I don't know if any other town is kicking in yet. I haven't heard anything from Dick yet.
Yeah, we should probably check on that, because right now we just paid both. We paid the before and we paid the after January 1st.
All right.
I think we were taking it on faith that the other towns would be,
Right.
Right, but-
It should come back to us whether or not they are.
right?
Right.
Okay, town manager report, Lorna?
Deadline for department and committee reports for the annual town report is January 5. That's this week. Deadline for articles for the next newsletter is January 15. Auditors will be here the week of January 22. The next budget meeting is January 8. And nomination papers for election of officers are due back January 15. That's a holiday, but so it's probably the 16th.
Yeah, because Mary told me the 17th.
Oh, that Wednesday. I was going by the date of voting for town meeting, which is March 15. It's bifurcated, March 15 and 16.
Okay, I mean, I'll have my info for that, but she said the 17th.
That's what she told me today too.
Right.
17, yeah.
17th.
Did we, no, it's only pretty sure, did we find out about those signs?
Yes, I did ask Dan about the signs. He said that he had contacted DOT. They were reluctant and had some pretty strict parameters about putting anything permanent. They have to be really far off the road. Something about holding, I didn't follow all of what he said, but something about holding signs. Put up right before the event, taken down immediately afterward, and they would police it. In fact, they would remove them if we didn't follow all of their protocols. They're the ones who actually suggested the signs that were purchased because they thought that those would work better. They gave him that information for those signs.
So that should have come back. It should have come back,
I'd like
and
to
we
see
should have
that. I'd like
been
to
part
see
of the
that, like-
process.
We put up a signpost, it shouldn't have to be any farther back off the road than any of their DOC signs, which are
Right,
very long, 4x4, 6x6 posts.
and they're not that permanent a post.
And,
It's not like affixing a deadly object.
and they may not have understood, you may not have got it clarified enough, you know.
Right, and I'm not sure why Dan, the DOT really should have been, you on
I don't even remember permanent signs. I was trying to look
I
back
think that's
in
maybe
minutes
before you
about
went.
it.
Town manager.
No, it was just a few months.
That was
ago.
it after.
it. It was,
It was after town meeting last year, this year, 2023 town meeting.
yeah,
I remember signs, but I remember we wanted something lightweight because I remember Melanie having to pile signs into her car. I remember that conversation, but I don't remember
But they wanted
permanent
something
signs.
permanent so that they wouldn't be responsible for
Right.
chucking them back and forth because they are having cumbersome.
at the very least, I'd like to see the permanent ones for, over by the center for all season on that main road. Small portable ones that fold up easy, that are light, you know, they'll be fine over on the west road or something. But I'd really like to have a couple of permanent signs.
I don't even know who to contact it. It would be DOT, right?
Yeah.
I think that's
You
who
need to
we.
call.
Where would they go? They couldn't go in the right of way, like just hold them on the
Well, you
road.
know, the same place the DOT puts up their signs, they put up signs all the time, they have the blue signs that tell businesses.
Hmm.
Yeah,
They don't, shouldn't have to go any farther back than those, because as long as you're using the same standards of a whole that they use,
Right.
they're no more of a hazard than theirs are.
I'll
Is that
check
Dave
DOT and see.
Yeah, just see if we
I've
can
got
get
a
some
couple
other-
of contacts.
And do we have an actual picture of what they purchased yet?
He did send me one.
That's just supposed to be.
The other thing is, you may want to put that there was a fatal accident, that's why we do the signage now. There.
Right. Cause you don't want people parking up there on the side of the
I
road.
don't know if you can see.
Yeah, those are just like the ones who fire.
Tried finding-
Yeah,
Those blow over.
Yeah, and they're not very fun to handle, they're not very fun to put up.
There's roll-up signs.
Yep.
but then we spent $1,000 on those.
Yeah. Basically,
They're
they're
good,
like
they're-
fiberglass poles in the back, you flex them in, hook them into the pockets on the sign.
Yeah.
So I guess what probably I would
It does
for
it,
Dan
though.
would be if you bring a request to the select board and we approve something. If you find you can't do what it is that we approved, then that has to come back to the select board. Yeah, because we don't want anybody else getting hit coming out of there when we've got some sort of an event. Yeah, that was awful.
Okay, so I have something that probably should have been under other business. I have packets pertaining to the
Yeah, I think.
town manager evaluation.
Just hand them out.
So I'll hand them out, but we need to set an executive session to discuss. We need to fill out our forms that are in here. And we need to have an executive session on ourselves so that we can review.
Okay.
So. So do we want to have an executive session in 3 weeks after the next meeting? Do we want to have one after the budget meeting?
My only problem with the budget meeting, yes, I don't get out of work until 5 o'clock on Mondays, and I set the budget meetings for 6, which gives me an hour to go home. Let the dogs out, feed them, pretend I've been there for a few minutes, so. So I don't know that it'll take us a ton of time, so.
Want to do 2 weeks at our executive session?
At our next meeting? in 2
Yeah,
weeks?
maybe do it at the end of that one, since we're already, and then if we need something after that, we can.
Because then
try to
then we'll have to meet
navigate.
with Lorna at a different time.
Yeah.
That's how we did it before. was
Yep.
We met first and then at a different time, we had an executive session. with Lorna.
That sounds good.
So this, what we have today,
This, yes,
we fill this out.
I saw you.
and Have
I
it
think that's.
already.
Oh, yeah, they have to go this way.
Executive session. in 2
Yes.
weeks,
You
right?
wrote fast.
yes.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, Peter just asked the question, though, there's one form in here that we filled out, that's the same form that we filled out for the 6-month review. But now it's the same form, but just in this pack,
Okay,
okay? So before the time that we meet in executive session, we should all fill those out and bring them back.
why don't we bring them back Monday night, the 8th, when we're doing our budget meeting?
No, because these are all confidential and so we don't want them,
No, we can bring them back and give them to you on the 8th.
We don't have to.
No.
no, it's not that complicated, because we just, when we did it the last time, we just all went through our
Okay,
suggestions,
oh, okay,
our comments.
okay,
We did it all together. It's not a compiling thing.
okay.
So fill out by the 16th.
So fill out and just remember that all of this is confidential. I didn't have a confidential stamp at home. Stamp on it.
I can't put it in the newsletter?
Tweet it out? No?
Okay,
Okay, anything else?
anybody? And then we adjourn.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Okay,
Did we have to sign those? guys?
Yes, and we have to sign.
We have 3?
It's always my good thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
More paper.
oh.
That's the board.